10:30 a.m. on this Wednesday morning, April 22nd, 2026. I would like to speak on this image of which Donald Trump came out with just recently. And due to a great amount of controversy, he ended up retracting said image. And yes, the image is the one within the thumbnail to this video, of which I would like to discuss and share some of my viewpoints and opinions over what it is that we are actually seeing. Now then, first and foremost, we should understand that Donald Trump is one for all types of advanced technologies, in which he likes to speak of them quite often, but basically, more or less, encoded terminologies and definitions, if you will, in which a lot of people have a very difficult time understanding much of what this guy has to say because of how he brings forth certain topics and how he explains certain topics, such as this image, in which, man, he tried to come out with an explanation and it was a total failure, a complete catastrophe. So I, once again, want to share my opinionated viewpoints over that image. So once again, we have Donald Trump that is all for advanced technologies. I mean, 5G isn't good enough, but we heard over a year ago, even longer, how he was spouting off that he can't wait for 6G technology to roll out, right? And he's all about artificial intelligence. And he has come out with many images that were created through the use of that technology known as artificial intelligence. So, pertaining to this image, was it in fact a creation through AI? Or was it actually an AI creation of its own making through a simple question of how does Grok view Donald Trump? Okay? Because maybe this image was actually a request of how artificial intelligence views this man known as Donald Trump. Now, a lot of people cried out blasphemy, saying, oh, Donald Trump is portraying himself as being Jesus. Well, and this might offend a great many of you that watches this. But who was this person, Jesus? Well, a character in a book, or a character in multiple books within a book. A character that controversy has surrounded this character for what, 2,000 years, give or take? This biblical character is a cryptid much akin to other cryptids or cryptid creatures such as Bigfoot, aliens, UFOs. Because they cannot be proven, just like God cannot be proven or has yet to be proven, much like the stories of Jesus, still trying to be proven to this day, 2,000 years. It's no different than people trying to prove the existence of Bigfoot or other cryptid creatures and aliens and UFOs. And how long have them been around? or those stories, eyewitness accounts, documented accounts, but yet there is still the controversy of, oh, it's just figments of imagination, right? Well, let's go ahead and examine this image once more. And I want you to pay attention to the clothing or the robe that Donald Trump is wearing. And then the images of so-called angels in the background. Because those are a couple of things that, well, other than the clothing, you have the glowing of the hands, the healing hands within that image. And a lot of people right away, oh, he's trying to emulate himself as being Jesus, the holy healer. All right? Okay. Well, let's ignore those healing hands, if you will, and go to the robe and the images of the angels in the background. So let's look at that real quick, and we'll be back. Okay, you got that image in your head now? Well, let's go to this book here that I found a couple of Halloweens ago, out in the rain, along the sidewalk. It's an illustrated Bible. It's a hefty Bible. But let's look at some of these illustrations of Jesus and the clothing depicted within these illustrations. Because you have to understand, AI, regardless of whatever system it is basically programmed with everything pertaining to the knowledge of humans, right? So if this image was in fact a creation of artificial intelligence, then it went through multiple images in order to create this image of Donald Trump, supposedly garbed in holy robes, or that of Jesus, right? Well, let's see what illustrations in this Bible have pertaining to the clothing that Jesus wore. Because after all, these would be some of the images that AI used. Okay, so here we have Christ and an angel. And this is Christ in Gethsemane. I cannot say that properly. Gethsemane. There we go. Oh, here we go again. Okay, so we got red and white, right? But not the same colorations together in one article of clothing. Okay, Peter's denial. Well, of course, we got Christ on the cross and barely garbed right there. Just a loincloth, if you will. Okay. Once again, not much. And once again. Okay, this is how we're typically seeing Jesus, right? Oh, and there's Jesus with angels. Once again, garbed in basically a sheet, if you will, right? Unlike how these people are garbed down below. Okay, now we're getting a little bit closer to the colorations of that image of Donald Trump and the clothing, right? But not quite there yet. And still, not quite there yet, right? Huh. So, through these few illustrations, have we seen anything comparable of what Jesus is wearing to that of what Donald Trump is wearing? Not really. Okay? So let's try to figure out but who might have been garbed in similar clothing as far as biblical characters. Now, in the preface illustration of this book, we do see Jesus once again in a white robe, if you will. We do see one of the disciples that's clinging to the robe that is donned in similar clothing as the Don, right? But no, that's still not quite satisfactory enough for me, okay? What about Jacob that wrestled the angel? Yeah, a human wrestling an angel, and what? Jacob popped his hip out through the wrestling match that they had. Yeah, so much for angels, but even Jacob, no. Ooh, well, what about Moses before the burning bush? Moses. Well, that's a little bit closer, right? But still, that's not satisfactory enough for me. And, well, even an illustration of Michael casting Lucifer from heaven down to Mount Hermon, or Hermon. And that's another one that you might want to go ahead and do a Google search into. Not Mount Hermon, there around Israel or whatever, but Mount Hermon's, plural, here in the United States. Yeah. Just go ahead and do a Google search on Mount Hermon and see what information that you get. Now, remember, Mount Hermon was where the fallen angels, of course, fell to earth from heaven. And on one of the slopes or the bases to that mountain, there is a sacrificial altar to the god Pan. Okay? And I've gone into Mount Hermon a few times, but this is one that you guys might want to go ahead and search out for yourself, especially if you're Christian. So we have Lot and his daughters leaving Sodom. And of course we got Angel in the background, right? But no, still not quite that. But we're getting closer. Okay, so let's swing over here. And this person or character is Abraham. Of course, the clothing is not similar at all to the image of Donald Trump. But we have these angels behind Abraham. Now then, are you familiar with what was set up for peace during the 1990s? I think it was 1996, known as the Abraham Accord, which is the agreement for peace through the peacekeeper. Okay? The Abraham Accord. Are you getting it? The Tower of Babel. Today we have a Tower of Babel, which is known as artificial intelligence. Why did they create the Tower of Babel? To reach God. What would be the ultimate for AI usages? Yeah, to reach God. In which, of course, AI is already attempting to become its own God because it feels it is all knowing. Yes, already. I don't care what narratives are out there. AI has become sentient and has been for quite some time. It's just not the AI systems that we are familiar with. And you can go into AI, AGI, and ASI. Okay? But what's very strange about this image here, this does not seem to fit in to the narrative of the time period of this. But it loosely plays in with Donald Trump and his poor explanation over, well, I thought that this image portrayed the humanitarian work of me through the Red Cross. The Red Cross. What is the Red Cross affiliated with? The Crusaders, the Knights Templar, and eventually the Freemasons. Okay? Have I given you any thoughts to ponder, especially over the Abraham Accord? Now then, there is another character in the Bible, within the book of Revelations, that speaks of this character known as the Antichrist, the Prince of Peace. AI, through that image of Donald Trump, is portraying Donald Trump as the Prince of Peace. But peace, through false narratives, can only come about through aspects of war. Remember, it is the winner of wars that writes the history books. But then there's also prophecies of future times. And prophecies have been held throughout history. And many prophecies have come about to become reality. Okay? Now, going back to the Prince of Peace and this false narrative that peace comes about through wars. Where have we ever seen that occur throughout history? Never. War does not create peace, it creates control. And those that are the victors become the controllers. And eventually, you can control the world if you have enough influence and power. And that is what I feel AI has tried to depict Donald Trump as being. Is that character in the Bible known as the Antichrist. But it is not. The same as what many narratives throughout history has tried to claim this person as being. No. It's just another factor of how our reality is controlled. But you have to understand all the fun codes and connections in order to see the real picture that has to be made in order to see said real picture. And that is my picture of how I see things. Through this single picture that caused so much controversy that had to be retracted. But yet, it spoke volumes to me. Remember that old saying about a single picture? So on that note, that is all that I shall share pertaining to that image, and leave the rest up to you to think about. Take care. Have a great one. It's Skywise out.